Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. My name is Dwayne Patterson, and I will be filling in on the final day of Hugh's vacation. He does return, well, technically, he returns in hour 3 with a new version of the Hillsdale Dialogue, a new edition that returns. Now that the Republic is in safe hands, we can get back to Plato's Republic, the in-depth study that Dr. Larry Arnn and Dr. Daniel O'Toole of Hillsdale College have been doing with Hugh over the last, couple of months, 2.5 months or so. It's been a long, deep dive into Plato's Republic, and Hugh will return in hour 3. But it's just you and me and a couple of guests. We've got Ben Domenech coming up from The Spectator. We will be having a conversation with Captain Jerry Hendricks, the author of To Provide and Maintain a Navy. And Tarzana Joe will be along with the poem of the week. But I don't know how I get to be so fortunate as to always be the one in this chair filling in for Hugh on huge news days. Yesterday, when I was taping my Dwayne's World podcast, which will populate sometime this morning, we hadn't even had the news yet that there was going to be a replacement pick for Attorney General. The news had just broken that Matt Gaetz had withdrawn his name from consideration for the Attorney General pick. And everybody was waiting around to see what would happen next or when something might happen next. And it took about 90 minutes for the president to make a replacement nomination, and it was a home run pick. Well done, Mr. President. Bravo, Mr. President. And let me also say bravo to Matt Gaetz and bravo to Pam Bondi. Let me explain kind of what the last 24 hours has been like. Many of the nominees that the president-elect has submitted thus far started to work their way onto the Hill over the last couple of days. J.D. Vance, the incoming vice president, still current senator from the great state of Ohio, was also making the rounds, talking to his current and future former colleagues, and kind of getting the pulse of where the Senate was on a myriad of cabinet picks. Which ones were going to run into trouble, which ones needed a little extra hand-holding with a couple of senators. You know, the Sherpa process has already begun in the transition. This administration, unlike what happened in 2016 after Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, they're hitting the ground running. He's making a lot of his nominations, and he's putting them in front of the senators that are with the respective committees, and the process is moving along at kind of a Sherman's March-esque fashion, and that's a very, very good thing. There's a lot of things in this country that needs fixing on day one, and this new team of the president is seemingly taking that very seriously. They're not going to waste a lot of time, and that's a very good thing. So all these people are on the Hill working their way through the Senate office buildings. And the nomination of Matt Gaetz, I like to hearken back to what our friend Scott Jennings said earlier this week on CNN. And that is, of all the picks, and we're north of 30 now that the president-elect has made. And honestly, in their heart of hearts, if you got people away from the news media and you just sat them down and you knew they were going to tell you the truth and they didn't have to answer for it, didn't have to go public, in their heart of hearts, even Democrats, they would tell you that of the 32, 33, 34 picks Donald Trump has made, there may be 3 of them that give them heartburn, maybe 4 that give them heartburn, Matt Gaetz included in them. And the rest of them, they'll oppose and they'll try to stretch it out and delay and stall and do the 30 hours of debate and slow and gum up the works just because it's Donald Trump we're talking about. And these are Donald Trump's picks. So just out of pure partisanship, they'll try to oppose and delay and stall and do all the gamesmanship that we've seen out of the Democrats the last decade or so. But in their heart of hearts, their heart's not in it. They know these picks are largely fine. There's just 3 or 4 out of the 10% or less of the picks are the ones that they have angst about. And as Scott Jennings said, Matt Gaetz was the only one of all of the slate of candidates, nominees, that kind of had to play their way in, that were falling short of the bar of confirmability before the process even started, before hearings even started. And that's Matt Gaetz. And, we have said our piece, Hugh has said his piece about Matt Gaetz ever since that his nomination was made, that there are plenty of people that could give you the upside of what a Matt Gaetz could deliver as Attorney General. And there are upsides to Matt Gaetz as being Attorney General. There's you want somebody to be kind of a bull in a china shop when it comes to the fifth floor of the DOJ. You need to clear out and you need to be a disruptor in that agency. Matt Gaetz certainly would have been that. But there are 24 people that you can name that would have been that disruptive force without the downside and without the problem of confirmability and not being able to implement that change in the new administration right away. At best, Matt Gaetz, if he would have been able to get confirmation, would have been months down the road, and you lose a lot of ground. And you didn't have to lose that ground because there's lots of other people out there. So what happened? Matt Gaetz took the temperature up there. J.D. Vance probably took the temperature up there and figured that there are 4 hard no's. And amongst his Senate GOP conference to Matt Gaetz, meaning it's a non-starter. I don't care what he says. I don't care what he does. I don't care how he performs in a confirmation hearing. It's a no for me, dog. And so if you got 4 missing out of the GOP conference, you can't assume one Democrat would support him. And in going in with 53, you lose 4. Well, the math isn't there. And everybody realized it, including Matt Gaetz. Here was his note yesterday on Twitter/X. I had excellent meetings with senators yesterday, and I appreciate their thoughtful feedback and the incredible support of so many. While the momentum was strong, it is clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump-Vance administration transition. There is no time to waste on a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle. Thus, I'll be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Trump's DOJ must be in place and ready on day one. I agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly and thank Matt Gaetz for having that kind of foresight and not being the distraction. No one person should be a distraction to the president's agenda coming in. The American people voted overwhelmingly for the president's agenda. You don't want somebody on Trump's team, either intentionally or inadvertently, being something that delays that from happening. So good for Matt Gaetz to recognize that and step aside for the better course of the agenda's sake. Now, there was lots of talk and lots of speculation online that, okay, well, if Matt Gaetz is no longer in consideration, sure, he resigned from the House, but he technically just won re-election in the November 5th elections. So he could theoretically just retake his seat in the House. Well, no, he really can't. Because here is the resignation letter that Matt Gaetz wrote to the House of Representatives, and it was CC'd to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. The Speaker Pro Tem laid before the House the following resignation from the House of Representatives. Dear Mr. Speaker, I hereby resign as United States Representative for Florida's 1st Congressional District, effective immediately, and I do not intend to take the oath of office for the same office in the 119th Congress to pursue the position of Attorney General in the Trump administration. The second he wrote, I do not intend to take my seat. That legally can be defined by Ron DeSantis as an intent for a vacancy, and he can call a special election. And that's indeed what I think he's going to do. So, all that's out there. So what do we know about Pam Bondi? That's what we're going to discuss the rest of the hour, because this is a phenomenal pick. I mean, a phenomenal pick. I can't tell you how excited I am that Pam Bondi is going to be the Attorney General of the United States. for the left that thought they were going to claim their scalp with Matt Gaetz. And boy, do we dodge a bullet here. Oh, are they having a heartburn over Pam Bondi? And this is going to be grand to watch. Matt Gaetz is out. Pam Bondi is in. Bob Casey is out. And Dave McCormick is in. I mean, it doesn't get any better than this, right? Let's take a look at what's going on in the market, because is it a good day? Is it a bad day? What about gold? What about inflation? Of course, the market report is brought to us by AmericanFederal.com, 800-221-7694. That's 800-221-7694. You should give Nick Grovich and his team a call, because gold is doing something this week. When I talked to you on Monday, gold in pre-market trading had jumped up about $25, which is kind of a healthy jump in overnight or early market trading. And here I am to end the week. And gold right now in early pre-market trading is up $34 again. It's back up over $2,700 an ounce. And I'm thinking, so what's going on? Why is it jumping back up again? And then I read the news that the producer price index, not the CPI, but the PPI index number came out yesterday. And wholesale prices, which usually are a forerunner of what retail prices are going to be in the next month, things ticked up again another 0.2 of a point. So we haven't seen the end of inflation yet. The materials going into final products that you're going to buy in the next few months, that's getting more expensive to retailers by 0.2 of a point. And that's cumulative over recent months and recent years. It just keeps snowballing, and things are still getting more expensive. Is that why gold, being the hedge against inflation that it is that why it's making a move again? Is this the right buy point? Is this the time to pad your portfolio a little bit to try and cover any last-minute inflation that's going to happen before Trump policies take over? Nick Grovich and his team are going to know. You should give them a call and talk it through with them. AmericanFederal.com, or call 800-221-7694. Now, the Pam Bondi pick. I'm still ecstatic about this pick. Here's what we know as of Friday morning. Mark Cuban, the billionaire who was hired on as a surrogate for Kamala Harris down the stretch, until he made a regrettable appearance on television and said, come on, no strong woman would surround themselves with Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't have any smart, intelligent women, strong, intelligent women around him. Everybody knows this. Now, that was an unfortunate faux pas, and a big hat tip to my colleague in Texas, Mark Davis, the host of the morning show on AM 660 The Answer, our flagship in Dallas. He actually got to talk to Mark Cuban when this whole kerfuffle was going on. And I think it was a day later, maybe 2 days later, but it was like right afterwards. And he got Mr. Cuban to say, yeah, I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry I said that. And he got him to walk it back and give an actual abject apology. And good on Mark for doing that. Both Marks, actually. Mark Davis for providing that forum, and for Mark Cuban to go on it and actually recognize the mistake he made. Now, of course, it didn't matter in the overall scheme of things, because just a few hours after that interview, the Harris campaign said, thanks, but no thanks, you're sidelined, and they did not allow him to be a surrogate anymore. But the damage was done, right? The word still stuck. So here is the strong, intelligent women that Donald Trump doesn't surround himself with as of today. His chief of staff, Susie Wiles, is a strong, intelligent woman. His attorney general is a very strong, intelligent woman in Pam Bondi. His DHS secretary is going to be Kristi Noem, a very strong, intelligent woman from South Dakota, governor there. His director of national intelligence, a very strong, intelligent woman named Tulsi Gabbard. His UN ambassador is a home run pick, Elise Stefanik. Nobody questions her chops. You got to think Mark Cuban is still paying the price for that. And we haven't even gotten to the Florida effect. I mean, MAGA, sure, make America great again, but it's really MAFA. We're going to make America Florida again. We're going to get into a lot more detail on Pam Bondi in just a minute. What a great day to be doing this show. There's so much good news. The winning. I mean, it's getting hard to stand all the winning. I'll do my best. I'm gonna brace myself for even more winning to come. But the winning, I don't know. It's pretty severe right now. We are all Florida right now because Donald Trump is a resident of Florida. The chief of staff, Susie Wiles, is a resident of Florida. The Secretary of State, who will fly through confirmation with probably north of 80 votes. I mean, I can't imagine more than 10, 15 Democrat senators going against their colleague Marco Rubio. That's just there still is a little collegiality in the upper chamber. Marco Rubio is a Florida resident. The National Security Advisor, our friend Michael Waltz, longtime weekly guest on this program, and joining a long list of former weekly guests as they go into very key positions in government. Michael Waltz is, of course, from Florida. And now Pam Bondi, the former two-time Attorney General from the Sunshine State, is representing Florida. That's not a bad thing. Florida is kind of the model for how to do a state. I mean, it just is. There's lots of great red states that are out there. I mean, Ohio is really pouring it on. Texas is doing a great job. There's lots of there's lots of great red states out there that are helping realign American politics. But right at the very head of that is Florida. The transformation they have done from 2000 to today in 24 years is nothing short of remarkable. So hopefully that some of that magic can be transposed onto the federal government. That would be a very, very good thing. So, Pam Bondi. The reactions, as you would expect on regime media, are mixed. There is some good. There is lots of hand-wringing, even after they got what they wanted or purported to want, which was the removal of Matt Gaetz. Eli Honig, who is got lots of experience at DOJ, is one of the legal contributors to CNN, was on last night with Caitlin Collins, and he didn't mince any words. He's pretty jazzed about this pick as well. Cut 17, Harlan.
Well, Caitlin, she's way more qualified than Matt Gaetz. Let's start with that. You know, last week when Matt Gaetz was announced as Trump's original pick, you and I said there's two main things you have to look at: qualification and independence. So on the first of those qualifications, Pam Bondi is, without a question, qualified to be Attorney General. She's been a prosecutor for 20 years in Florida. For 8 of those, she was the Attorney General of the state. That's a very big, very complicated job, and that level of experience is on par with or better than most United States attorneys general that we've seen over the past 50 years or so. When we get into independence, though, things get a little more complicated. Now, there's nothing wrong or unusual with an attorney general who shares the same politics and ideology as the president. That's the way these things work. But I think the big problem with Pam Bondi is she was a vocal 2020 election denier. And I think that raises legitimate questions about her independence and her credibility, and I expect that to be a sticking point when she goes in front of the Senate.
Okay. That may be a sticking point, and I'm sure the left is going to try to use that to derail her. Can you name 4 senators that are going to say, yeah, I don't want to do that, and vote against a woman, a Republican, as Attorney General? It ain't going to happen. Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins are going to come to grips, and they'll be on board with this. And even if they were to turn, that will be the only 2 that would turn. Everybody else, she'll sail through very well because she can acquit herself quite well. I'm going to play audio of Pam Bondi in a second. But to contrast that to do the hair on fire, dive out the window rhetoric, on MSNBC, Jason Johnson was on with Ari Melber. And here's what they're concerned about. Cut 16.
Pam Bondi is exactly what I was saying in the last segment that we should all fear. Because she's competent. We may not agree with her ideologically, but she actually knows how to do this job. So if anyone on the Democratic side or anyone who cared about liberty or justice was thinking, well, maybe Matt Gaetz will screw this up and that'll give us some time. No, Pam Bondi knows what she's doing. She knows what she's doing about immigration. Remember, Florida is one of those states that's been very aggressive about migrants and deportation and moving people to different states and everything else like that. Florida has enacted all sorts of rules and laws to curtail students and what they can do on campuses and finding legal justifications for manipulating education money. She is a dangerous and effective pick, and that's frankly worse than what we would have got with Matt Gaetz, even with the deplorable moral background that he has.
Yeah, and I want to discuss that with a little more depth with both of you, including her record on civil rights, LGBTQ rights, and other issues that are front and center at the DOJ, and which we know were also big campaign issues this cycle.
So they're trying to line up what the line of defense is to go at her, to combat her in confirmation hearings. It's not going to work. She's going to sail through confirmation relatively easily. Lindsey Graham, one of the senior members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, he and Grassley are going to make the weather on that committee. Well done, Mr. President. Picking Pam Bondi for Attorney General is a grand slam, touchdown, hole-in-one, ace, hat trick, slam dunk, Olympic gold medal pick. She will be confirmed quickly because she deserves to be confirmed quickly. That's exactly the sentiment that she's going to get amongst virtually all of the Senate GOP conference. I would expect her to actually get some votes from the Democrats, too. I actually would. She's very, very competent. Let's hear from Pam Bondi herself, because you heard MSNBC complain about her record on immigration. This is a press conference she held, maybe a dozen or 10 years ago while she was serving as Attorney General of Florida. And here's how smart and here's how she takes her job seriously. Cut number 19, Harley.
These criminals made one very big mistake. They wound up in Polk County. And I'll tell you, it's bad enough in one thing to profit from poisoning others, but it's another when you bring drugs from Mexico into our country, California, Texas, Georgia, and end up in our state and do it with impunity. Because when you're in this country illegally and you're doing things illegally, I want to tell you, and you wind up in Polk County, Grady Judd is going to find you, the DEA is going to help them, and my statewide prosecutors are going to lock you up for as long as we can.
And we're going to enjoy it.
And each of these defendants are looking at 30 years in Florida State Prison for conspiracy to traffic drugs.
Can you just imagine her at the DOJ absolutely wielding the power on the fifth floor, getting rid of the deadwood, and actually starting to enforce laws again? The mind reels, right? I want to go back and play at least part. Maybe we'll do this a little bit over the break and do it coming back from the break as well. She was on with Maria Bartiromo on the Fox Business Network back in May of 20. This is on the eve of the Trump trials in Lower Manhattan, right? And you want to hear kind of how she thinks and kind of what her legal mind is and whether she's going to be a good fit for DOJ. Give a listen to this, cut 20.
Yeah, sure, Maria. And I'm going to be in the trial with President Trump tomorrow, observing, because this is what I've done my entire career. You know, Michael Cohen is expected to be on the stand, as you said, again today, still undergoing cross-examination. But, you know, one of the most important things this jury is going to hear at the conclusion of the trial is a jury instruction that says, if you don't believe anything a witness has said, even part of it, Maria, you can disregard their entire testimony. So Michael Cohen was crossed so well by Todd Blanche and caught him in numerous lies. He's a convicted liar. So I think the jury's going to be able to disregard every single thing Cohen says.
Well, it's interesting. The judge's direction is going to be critical here. What else are you expecting the judge to say in terms of direction to the jury?
Well, and you know, that's troubling because this is not an ordinary trial. It's never been tried before in New York. Multiple jurisdictions had already declined to prosecute this. So jury instructions are going to be a critical part of that trial. I think a lot of jury instructions outside the presence of the jury and the media will be argued today by both sides later this afternoon in front of the court, because they have not proven their case, and it should be a directed verdict, meaning the defense attorneys, President Trump's attorneys, will make a motion to dismiss prior to it ever going to the jury, because the defense didn't make a case. They did not prove beyond and to the exclusion of a reasonable doubt, or any doubt, frankly, not even a preponderance of the evidence, that President Trump committed a crime. But as we've seen, this judge has let so much in that should not have come into evidence throughout this trial, including Stormy Daniels' testimony. I believe he's committed reversible error, even as early as jury selection, where he was keeping jurors on that trial who said they did not like President Trump. You know, all the rights here should go to the defendant, and they have not in this case. So we'll see what happens.
Can Trump get?
Okay, let's cut it off there. We'll pick up more of it in after the break here. But again, let's understand what the charge is going to be at trying to scuttle the nomination of Pam Bondi. It's not about her intelligence or capabilities. Her chops, as you heard, are as solid as anybody you're ever going to hear. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's very solid. The attack on her by the left is going to be she's too much of a loyalist to Donald Trump. The same party that gave us Merrick Garland, Loretta Lynch, Janet Reno, and Eric Holder are now worried about somebody at DOJ being too loyal to the president. I'll take that fight any day of the week. That will just be rich. We're going to get back to Pam Bondi when she was appearing on Maria Bartiromo's program back in May of this year on the eve of the Trump trials, just to give you a sense for the kind of mindset she's going to bring to DOJ, and she's going to be confirmed to DOJ. Let's get back to that video, Harley.
Fair jury, a fair trial, and a fair look at all of this from the jury in New York.
Again, we've got, that's why they chose this jurisdiction, of course, one of the most liberal jurisdiction in the country, Maria. But, I'm hoping for one honest juror on there, one who will at least hang this jury, because there is no way this case will ever get retrialed. And if convicted, it will get reversed. But 12 jurors should see there is no evidence there. And again, it shouldn't even go to the jury. It should be dismissed prior to that legally, just by pure legal standards.
Yeah, I mean, I keep questioning what the Supreme Court has to say about all of this, watching this charade, one sitting president trying to take down his political opponent, another president. Do you want to see this every season? I mean, is this going to play into what the Supreme Court decides in terms of presidential immunity?
Well, and I think they are going to give him presidential immunity, but in this case, this is just one big press conference trying to smear Donald Trump, trying to hurt Donald Trump. The gag order is completely illegal. The rights, again, go to the defendant. They're letting Michael Cohen out there do these ridiculous TikTok videos, screaming and yelling, yet Donald Trump can't defend himself.
Yes,
so this entire case has just been one big press conference trying to smear Donald Trump, but it's failed miserably.
I would think it's unlikely that Trump would testify at this trial, but the Wall Street Journal is out with a piece writing, Trump is rarely silent, but testifying would be really dangerous. They write this: a grueling cross-examination could torpedo the former president's chances with the hush money jury. Your reaction?
Yeah, and he's been very vocal, saying he wants to testify. And can you blame him? Because he's saying he's done nothing wrong. He's done nothing wrong. Yet, as a former prosecutor, and if I was his defense attorney, I'd be telling him there is no way you can testify, because this judge has not been following the law. This is an extreme example, Maria, but this judge could say, the prosecution could say, hey, have you ever committed jaywalking on Fifth Avenue? And Donald Trump would say, no, I don't jaywalk. But they could have some video from years ago of some tourist who has him jaywalking. This is an extreme example, of course. But then they could use that to try to make him look like a liar. And that's what the judge has been letting all of this irrelevant evidence in. And I think he would let the prosecutors ask him anything, even though he shouldn't. So that's why there's no way any defendant should testify in a situation like this.
Thoughts on the other trials, potential, and these other indictments, Pam? I mean, there's a lot of holes here, whether it be Georgia and, Fani Willis and the boyfriend, Nathan Wade, or whether it be Jack Smith now having to admit that he tampered with evidence in terms of the classified documents. Right. Where is all of this going? And we're 6 months away from a presidential election.
Yeah, in my opinion, none of these other trials will make it to trial ever, and especially they won't before the election. And that's been their goal. This has been a concerted effort to hit him in numerous jurisdictions. And look what the common denominator is. All of these prosecutors hate Donald Trump. They have a personal vendetta against him. They've been very vocal about it. Some have campaigned on getting Donald Trump. And as a career prosecutor, Maria, if you even have an appearance of a conflict, you get off a case. You recuse yourself from a case. There are safeguards in effect for that, and you put other prosecutors on the case. And here, they have done quite the opposite. Look at Fani Willis, of course, in Georgia, her affair with Nathan Wade. That case is falling apart. Jack Smith, they have said they've altered evidence in that case. And now I think with the presidential immunity issue out there, none of these cases will get to trial prior to the election. So this one is their last shot to get Donald Trump in a courtroom. So hopefully it won't work, and hopefully we'll have some honest jurors on there who are listening to the evidence.
She is going to be an absolute bulldog. And if you want to know how strong of a pick she is, here's what to watch between now and whenever they schedule her confirmation hearing. Watch the news ticker to see how many senior officials, senior lawyers on the 5th floor of DOJ start dusting off their resumes and start announcing they're resigning and leaving the agency ahead of her ultimate confirmation. When you see a lot of self-deporting going on at DOJ, that's a real good indication that exactly the right person is on their way and help is coming for the American people. It's a great, great pick. Well done, Mr. President. Now, coming up after the break, we're going to talk about this and a bunch more news of the week with our friend Ben Domenech of The Spectator. We'll have a conversation about the Pete Hegseth nomination and what the first 100 days at DOD would look like with our friend Captain Jerry Hendricks. Tarzana Joe will be along. And then, of course, we were going to turn things over to Hugh, who will be back with a new edition of the Hillsdale Dialogue with Dr. Larry Arnn as they dive back into Plato's Republic. If you like what you hear from me, you can go to Dwayne.world, DUANE.world, and check out my Dwayne's World podcast. Ben, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Dwayne. So here's the question that I have for you. I was up watching the end of that glorious Cleveland Browns.
The snow globe game, yes.
Snow globe game. By the way, this is another thing that modernity is trying to take away from us. The idea that they're going to build a dome there is absolutely a sin against snow football. It's horrible.
It's a crime against football. It would be. And
Jameis Winston, I mean, I did not know what I was missing out having never seen Jameis Winston play in the snow. It is a sight to behold as he the horse is prepared for battle, but the victory belongs to the Lord, as he tells the opening interviewer. And it was just an incredible sight. But I tweeted something about it at Hugh Hewitt this morning, and he responded to me before 6 a.m. So, I mean, how does vacation work for him? Isn't he supposed to be able to sleep in?
Right. He doesn't have smalls like you do, which is why you're up at this ungodly hour of the morning. But and I'll answer your question because I've worked for the guy for 25 years, right? Yeah. So I know the guy. I know how he operates. What would you describe as your ultimate vacation? If you could just take a week off, what does a glorious week off look like to Ben Domenech? What's a vacation?
A glorious week off for me would be going to the U.S. Virgin Islands with a box of cigars and a stack of books and a bottle of good dark rum. And just having long days, but to be honest, when you have little ones, as the Louis C.K. joke goes, you do the Tetris getting all the luggage into the car. You pack them into their seats. You shut the door and you walk around to the driver's seat, and that's your vacation.
Exactly correct. Now, my idea of a vacation is taking my astoundingly hot wife, Joy, on a trip to Bora Bora and spending a week, just the two of us.
Exactly.
And I mean, that's like the greatest vacation ever, right?
That's a very traditional American aspiring,
best vacation possible, dreamed up by Hugh Hewitt, is sitting on a porch somewhere by himself reading books.
Okay, so it's mine, but a little more attuned to perhaps the Midwestern soul.
He still will do politics. He'll still do what he wants to do. He'll still read. He'll still plug in. His idea of a vacation is just sitting there watching the news and reading books.
Oh no! You have to unplug. It's not a vacation if you have to watch the news.
That's
man.
just not how he's wired. That's just not how he's wired.
Once of letting the fine folks at Fox know where I was staying in the Outer Banks in North Carolina, thinking, this will only matter if something incredible happens. It turns out that we were on vacation the week that Mar-a-Lago was raided.
Oh.
So suddenly they were like, "We'll send a van to you," and I said, "No, you won't. We're in the Outer Banks." And they said, "Yes, we will." And sure enough, they sent a van all the way to the Outer Banks.
Yeah,
to what Fox and Friends said. That's how much
they drag you back in, right? The Godfather 3 line, right? So here's the thing with the Pam Bondi pick. A week ago, I think you and I and Hugh and a lot of us were kind of in the same boat about the Matt Gaetz pick. And at the time, I was doing a podcast with our friend Ed Morrissey, and there was like 21 picks that the president made thus far, and we gave them all letter grades. And you gave it a GPA after 21 picks and averaged it out. And even giving the Matt Gaetz pick an F, which I personally did and Ed Morrissey did, the grade weight was still a 3.3 week, or a couple of weeks, which is pretty good. Now you take off the Matt Gaetz pick and you put Pam Bondi in there and you recalculate the GPA. And I mean, we're talking magna cum laude material now, aren't we?
Oh, well, look, I think that what we can say about this is there was just very much a bad apple in this mix from day one. And here's the thing, there are always going to be controversial cabinet picks. You're never going to have a cabinet that doesn't have somebody controversial within it. Last time around for Joe Biden, that turned out to be Javier Becerra, who ended up having the closest margin of anybody. He got in by one vote. Susan Collins switching over to join the Democrats in order to get him in. And that was a situation where, frankly, everybody had concerns about him because he was such a partisan hack with no health experience. And, of course, he turned out to be that as HHS secretary.
And lost 400,000 kids.
Yeah, and lost 400,000 kids, which is just, just something you do on a day in the NY. So you have a controversial pick in every situation. But the question is, how much energy are you going to expend for that pick? Are they worth it? And in this case, the issue with Gaetz, and I think that everyone in the Senate, the reason it was such a jaw-dropping pick was not that it was, out of the range of possibility, though I think that nobody had him on their list. It's more, why would you run the risk of putting someone like this in such a significant position when there's no confidence that they even have the capability to do the job, when it isn't even worth it? You're going to be spending political capital on this guy, for several months, in a way that hampers your whole opening and your first 100 days and everything like that. Why not hit the ground running? And I think that that's the real, issue that was always there with Gaetz. The other thing, of course, is, and I do want to clarify this because I think people have depicted it falsely online in a lot of different ways. They basically retreated to this argument. There was a DOJ investigation into him on all of these ethical issues,
right? And
it didn't result in a conviction. Well, the DOJ, of course, investigates federal crimes. And that doesn't mean that, Matt Gaetz is innocent of things. It means more that he did not commit a federal crime. It's perfectly possible to do horrible things that ought to be disqualifying for anybody who tries to be the Attorney General of the United States, including the things that we know for a fact that he did. We have the records, we have the witnesses, we have everything that's involved. This is not some leftist conspiracy. And by the way, I would just say the simple fact is, in thinking about this rationally, and one of the reasons why I truly believe that he dropped out, and I've been told this by multiple people who are well connected in Florida and active in Florida politics, and not even particularly opposed to Matt Gaetz, is that there was more to come. Essentially, if you look back at that New York Times report about when these Venmo payments were made and when things started in terms of his relationship with someone who was convicted for federal crimes, and arranging all of these things, it started in 2017, right after he showed up in Washington. Now, if you are of the mindset that Matt Gaetz just started to do this kind of thing when he showed up in Washington, I have a bridge to sell you. The simple fact is that his days in the Florida legislature were known for this type of activity as well, and there would have been a further investigation into all of that, in terms of going back through his record. And I think that what he understood, and the mistake that I think he made, is I think that he thought that simply the power of Donald Trump would be able to move some of these senators, perhaps not counting on the fact that we have several lame duck senators who are going to be headed toward retirement. We have others who have districts and states who are simply, have already proven that they can overcome the animosity of Donald Trump, including Murkowski and Collins.
Right.
And I think that the simple fact was that he started underneath 50, and far underneath 50 from what I am told. And then he had no real plan to get to 50. And if you don't have a plan to get to 50, why expend any more political capital on this person?
And I'm thankful. I'm thankful he was at least gracious enough to say, it's not good for one person to get in the way of Trump's agenda.
I don't think that he said that. I personally don't think that he said that willingly. I think that Donald Trump understands the situation, and I think that he, had a conversation with Gaetz that ultimately led to this decision, because
fair enough.
Donald Trump does not like to lose, and that's something that it's been reported by some people. You can gauge the reliability of some of them, but it's one of the things where Mark Caputo is a pretty good connected Florida reporter, and that's what he says happened. Well, the thing that I just think was clear about this pick from day one was they did not have a strategy to get to 50. And as much as Donald Trump is very powerful, there are certain, steps that people are not willing to take when it comes to this type of out of the box, selection.
Just
really good.
Just a couple seconds left because the music's playing. How excited are you about Pam Bondi as a replacement? She's all the upside with no downside, right?
He should have named her from the first place.
Yep.
She's a perfectly good pick. She'll get the sail through.
The oldest of the miscellaneous random people that co-reside with us, the boy, for 4 years was a bandy in high school. He played the trumpet. And for 3 of those 4 years, my wife and I ran the music boosters for that high school. We were the band parents. We organized all the tournaments and all the accoutrements that go with the whole band subculture. We were very much a part of it. And we met a bunch of great friends that were on that board with us, and every year around the holidays, and this year it's going to be the weekend after Thanksgiving, we have a little get-together for a little reunion because we all became friends. But 2 of them are conservatives like me, and the wife of the couple pinged me, a week ago or so, and said, I don't think we can wait until we see after Thanksgiving because there's too much good political news and I really want to pick your brain. So can we get together beforehand? I said, sure, why don't you come over to my place? And so they're coming over this weekend and they said, so what's for dinner? And well, if you're going to ask me, I know what's for dinner, fillets. Now, we heard Ben Domenech talk about what a controversial pick was compared to what they're going to try to make out of some of Trump's picks now. And that controversial pick was Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra, who squeaked by with 1 vote because he had no experience running Health and Human Services. And I mentioned in a drive-by that he had lost 400,000 kids. Well, he has. Unaccompanied minors have disappeared. Largely probably into the sex trade underworld, which is a horrific thing on his watch. He showed up on Capitol Hill this week and got grilled. This is Wisconsin's Tom Tiffany asking him really tough questions. Cut number 8.
I want to ask you the Harris question. Would you change anything that you've done over the last 4 years in regards to illegal immigration?
Recognizing that we don't deal with immigration that is part of DHS's authority, we deal with the care, the human services side of care for kids.
Would you change anything that you've done in the last 4 years with 320,000 children unaccounted for by your administration?
We work tirelessly to strengthen and improve the program of the UC, the unaccompanied children that come before us, and we work really hard to make sure we first and foremost protect the safety and the well-being of those kids. Every day is a challenge, and we do the best we can.
He placed minors with people here as their quote-unquote sponsor, whose address is also the address of a strip club. He placed unaccompanied minors, the most vulnerable kids that are out there that are crossing the border, brought across by coyotes and dumped into the interior of the country. The HHS took custody of these kids and placed them with people that had felony convictions on their record for rape. It's not that he wasn't qualified, he's not, but he has no competence or skill set to be able to handle the job that he's doing, and it's had disastrous results. Look at Pam Bondi and the experience that she's going to bring to the job. It's night and day different. A new day is coming in this administration, and I can't wait to see it. Captain Jerry Hendricks, who is a military historian and strategist extraordinaire. He has authored all sorts of great content. He's got a great article that he co-wrote with Brent Sadler over at National Review called Restoring Our Maritime Strength, which we'll get to in just a minute. He, of course, has written the go-to manual for kind of the way forward for the United States Navy to provide and maintain a Navy. Welcome, Captain Hendricks. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning, Dwayne. I'm doing good, and I see that you've been up and around quite a while today.
Well, you know, somebody's got to do it. When the host decides to take a powder for a week, somebody's got to actually get up and run this thing. The show doesn't run itself, actually. But you and I had a conversation on my Dwayne's World podcast about a week and a half ago, and I kind of want to extend that conversation and bring it more into real time. We've talked a lot about a lot of the other picks, DOJ nominations and things like that, but I want to go back to the DOD pick of Pete Hegseth, who was on the Hill talking to a lot of senators. The controversies are being ginned up about him and how much trouble he's going to be in. My spidey sense still tells me I think he's going to clear the confirmation hurdle. And you and I talked about Hegseth before, and since I think you and I talked, you actually went back and read his book, The War on Warriors. And look, I'm a layman. You're the guy that knows this business a lot better than I do. I'm just an outsider, a civilian. But what I think needs to happen with the Pentagon are three things. This is the three biggest priorities for whoever is the next secretary. One, you've got to excise all of the woke policy and the practitioners of woke policy. Number two, you've got to kind of restore the warrior ethos in the building. And with that, you kind of provide an incentive for recruitment again, and you get the military being cool again, getting back to doing what they should be doing. And three, you've got to realign the Pentagon's force structure, their posture, and the industrial base to meet not just current threats, but future threats. Is that a fair analysis of what the next secretary has to do?
I think you've pretty much summed it up, and I think in a very cogent way. It's a very complex entity. It's a mechanism, the Pentagon. Many moving parts and gears. But you're right. The Secretary of Defense has to kind of bring it all together in sort of problems that can be solved, baskets that can be attacked, rather than becoming overwhelmed by the complexity of the problem. You have to start with the first step and then figure out where the priorities are. And the thing is that the Hegseth pick really represents a policy statement on the part of President Trump. He very clearly had issues with the Pentagon in his first term. And so he's coming back with Hegseth, and he's sending a statement, which is that he wants to prioritize effectively the culture of the Pentagon. He wants to reinstate a leadership culture in the Pentagon, the concept of unity of command. The fact is there's been a common watch phrase with Democrat administrations that diversity is our strength, when in fact the military ethos has been, for quite frankly, centuries, that unity of command. There is a reason why we wear uniforms, why we all have the same strange short haircuts. We all are going to come together to forget essentially our individual identities to have a uniformed identity, a group identity as we pursue and go on mission. And I think that that's what Hegseth gets at in his book. And by the way, he's written 3 books, co-authored with one, and then written 2 on his own. So I went out and got them so that I could get my mind around it. And I think that he's on to something, and I can see where President Trump was going with this selection. Obviously, Hegseth has got a really strong background. I know there's a lot of people say, well, he doesn't have, the type of background that goes into be Secretary of Defense. Well, I'm not really sure what background they're talking about, because we've had a number of different resumes that have played into DOD. He is not going to be the youngest man to be Secretary of Defense. That was Don Rumsfeld back in '75.
Right.
He's got experience. He's got 2 Bronze Stars and a combat infantryman's badge, which we all look at as sort of a real sign that he's had that experience. But he's moved on to have other experiences as a thinker and a writer. So I'm kind of looking. The one thing I think about this unity of command thing, and this versus this idea of diversity is our strength. Our national motto is e pluribus unum, out of many, one, not out of many. And so I think that that's the ethos that they're seeking to bring to the Pentagon right now.
Jerry Hendricks, a good mutual friend of ours, Kurt Schlichter, filled in this chair on Tuesday. And when he was talking about the Hegseth pick and what has to happen at Pentagon, he used the expression that whoever the next secretary is, you can't really go into the building and manage it because it's really an unmanageable place. Whoever the next secretary has to go in has to take command of the place. Number one, do you agree with Kurt's assessment? And can you explain to people kind of what the difference is and how that would manifest itself?
So I think this is an excellent point, which is, other aspects of the government can be managed or administered, but the Pentagon is the leader of the military, which is a command climate and culture. We are here to command. We are to set orders. We are to take orders from the commander in chief, transmit them to the forces, and then move out with the nation's missions to provide for the common defense, to go to the preamble of the Constitution. And so you really have to institute that as a command culture over there. By the way, command comes with 2 different parts. One is absolute responsibility, but then authority to match with that. And you have to have a balance between the responsibilities of command and the authorities that go with command. And I think that has been badly out of whack, not only over the last 4 years, but quite frankly, over the last 1 or 2 generations right now, going back to the end of the Cold War. We've lost a sense of that responsibility goes with it. This comes to one of the points that Brent and I made in our essay in National Review. One of the lead things that has to be done first is building the bench. Personnel is policy. So it's not just going to be Hegseth. Hegseth cannot come in, snap his fingers, and change everything. He's going to have to bring in a very strong team, both in the Office of Secretary of Defense, but then also in the services, secretaries, undersecretaries.
Absolutely. The service chiefs are everything. They absolutely are, especially SecNav. That's going to be the pick to watch, right? Because that's going to be the one that hinges how we look at future threats. Is who is going to be posturing what that part of the force is. We have to ramp up the Navy, because if we don't, the oceans aren't getting any smaller, right? And the threats from hypersonics and all sorts of other toys that are out there, we have got to have a change of thinking for how we have projection at sea. And I can't think of a more important pick outside of DOD Secretary than NAVSEC. Sec.
Well, I agree with you. You know, the Secretary of the Navy position is always strongly sought, because Secretary of the Army commands an army. Secretary of the Air Force commands the Air Force, leads the Air Force. Secretary of the Navy commands a Navy, an Army in the sense of the Marine Corps, and an Air
Correct.
Force in the sense of naval aviation for both of the services. So you really have a very diverse, force that you have to. It's a very complex mechanism that you have to understand. Now, the thing about that is you also have to take care of that. So there's personnel issues. We have a rapidly aging fleet in the sense of our naval force structure. The average age of our ships across the entire 294 ships in the fleet is growing because of how long we've been building and how slow we've been replacing our older ships right now. And so you have to get at that. A lot of our ships need repair. 40% of our submarines, our fast attack nuclear powered submarines right now, are tied to the pier. They have lost their dive certifications and cannot get underway. We have to get at that problem because the submarines are the cutting edge of the force. And we have to figure out a way of getting the defense industrial base engaged in order to grow it. You know, Brent and I set a goal of 333 ships by the end of the Trump administration. That's 4 years from now. And there's many ways of getting at that. We have to build more. We have to preserve that we have the ones that we have now a little bit longer. And we may have to go back to some of the ships that we've recently retired and bring them back out and refurbish them in order to do that. But we need those numbers because those numbers are what will establish conventional deterrence to keep the Chinese from moving aggressively, for instance, against Taiwan, or even our oldest treaty ally, the Philippines, who they're sort of much busting up and bruising right now in the South China Sea. So we need to have a fleet that's forward deployed and ready in order to do that.
We are talking about the article called Restoring Our Maritime Strength, which is in the December 24 print edition of National Review. We encourage you to pick it up. It's also online as well, written by Jerry Hendricks and Brent Sadler. Jerry, in our couple minutes left, trying to adapt the Pentagon to where we know it needs to go is like trying to take an aircraft carrier and making it do a U-turn. You can go hard left rudder as much as you want. It's going to take a while for that boat to finally catch and start to come around. So over the next 3 months, 6 months, assuming that Pete Hegseth gets in and the service chiefs that he wants gets in, what kind of metrics would you look to that would, in fact, real quick, what would you look to see if we're heading the right direction finally?
Well, I think that first of all, two things that we'd be looking for. One is the creation of what Brent and I call a Five Oceans Navy Act. This is a takeoff of actually the Two Ocean Navy Act that was passed in the late 1930s and 1940, where they actually began to purchase the ships in sort of massive block buys.
The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, that would be Tarzana Joe. You can reach Joe at tarzanajoe.com or tarzanajoe@reagan.com. Joe, what do you have for us this week?
Well, first, of course, it's that most wonderful time of the year when people are struggling to find Christmas gifts, and there is no better Christmas gift than either It Only Hurts When I Rhyme or the second best of Tarzana Joe, collected Tarzana Joe poetry, available at Amazon.com.
That goes without saying.
Yes. Wonderful part of the show is out of the way. This week's poem. Now that the dust has settled, I think that it's a must to learn what lessons can be learned from all the settled dust. Pollsters found the outcome incredibly distressing and did no better than a coin or simple random guessing. The crying pundits have produced real shortages of tissues. Perhaps instead of polling, they should concentrate on issues. We saw a grand experiment play out as we expected. Can someone be exalted who was formerly rejected? The media, like Hollywood, can only go so far, and talent is required if you want to be a star. Common sense rose from the dead to show the world who's boss. There is a path we will not take, a bridge we will not cross. Incumbency is hard to beat. That's often been discussed, but incumbents can be beaten when they lose the people's trust. Another blatant lesson the recent vote afforded is that multiple disasters will never be rewarded. No matter what restrictions our censors may enact, most folks in this country know a fable from a fact. And unlike the apocalypse, we know the moment when, on January 20th, the dust will fly again. That's Who's Going to Clean Up All This Dust by Tarzana Joe.
That's a great poem, Joe. And as I was thinking this, I have a nightmare scenario for you that I'm almost afraid to talk about, but would be just grand. You know the conversations that people have at Thanksgiving dinner, right? They've got the family members that are opposite sides of the ideological spectrum, and we do the obligatory show right before Thanksgiving of the conversation starters for Thanksgiving dinner, right? I'm thinking a late-minute ad. If somebody's got the money and somebody's got the ability, if they reach out to Tarzana Joe right now and say, hey, give me an ode for the conversation starter at Thanksgiving dinner, could you still turn around an ode that quick?
Well, it might be an appropriate poem for next week. We might share it with the universe.
Oh, and see, that would be a good thing, too. If you really want to do something special to just make sure you get that Thanksgiving dinner with all of the extended family off to a roaring start, contact Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com. Joe, thank you very much. That's going to be a lot of fun.
I don't want to be responsible for indigestion across the country, but we'll do what we can.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks, Joe. And you should reach out to Joe. Thousands of you have over the years. It's actually kind of phenomenal. Keeping Joe in business as the nation's poet is kind of a neat side effect of this show. I want to play one more clip and stick the dismount here for my portion of guest hosting today. Billy Jeff, former President William Jefferson Blythe Clinton, was on MSNBC a couple of days ago and had this angst about what the Democrats learned as the postmortem continues. Cut number 14, Harley.
We're behind in the sense that a lot of the small town and rural people are now highly sophisticated in how they get their information. And there are zillions of new websites now, all trying to advance their sort of conservative to right-wing radical cause. And a lot of times we're not playing on the same field.
And isn't that just a grand thing? That's one of the reasons why this country is headed a whole new direction, is because the left doesn't control the media anymore. One of those zillions of websites is the Heritage Foundation. Kevin Roberts, the head of the Heritage Foundation, has a brand new book out called Dawn's Early Light. And look, the country spoke pretty forcefully on November 5th, and they got tired of the way the country's being run by bureaucratic elites. And they pretty much voted to take back their country. Dawn's Early Light, chapter by chapter, goes into that whole movement of why the country ended up taking the turn that it took. Check it out, Dawn's Early Light. Go to Amazon or wherever you get your books and buy Dawn's Early Light now by Dr. Kevin Roberts of Heritage Foundation. And another one of those zillion websites out there is Dwayne's World. Oh, there's Highly Concentrated Hugh. There's the Hughiverse. We have lots of websites here in the greater Hugh Hewitt megalopolis that you can check out. Highly Concentrated Hugh, the video page on YouTube for Hugh Hewitt. He's got the Hughiverse, which I am in quite often, doing all sorts of musical and other podcasts with Ed Morrissey, Hughiverse.com. I write over at hotair.com, another great one of the zillions of websites. But you should check out Dwayne's World, Dwayne.world, Duane.world. I've got a brand new podcast that's going to be up in just a little bit. And Hugh Hewitt is right up after the break with a re-dive into Plato's Republic with Dr. Larry Yarn and Dr. Daniel O'Toole. And then Thanksgiving week, and we have a lot to be thankful for, don't we?